On my birthday, my family gave me a thoughtful gift. When I opened it, I found a notice telling me to move out of my own house. I smiled, and a few months later, returned the favor at their wedding. I read it. I'm a 32-year-old guy, Ronan, and what I'm about to share still feels like it belongs in some low-budget family drama. Not explosive, not theatrical, just strange, slow-burning, quietly messed up. The kind of story that you don't realize is actually going off the rails until you're halfway down the hill with no brakes. It starts with my birthday, or more accurately, the build up to it. But before I get into that, let me back up a bit, because I think this story only makes sense if you understand the people involved and how we got here. I own a house. Nothing massive, just a two-bedroom place in a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside the city. I bought it 3 years ago after saving for what felt like forever. I work in IT, not the flashy startup kind, more the quiet corporate kind where you slowly become the person who fixes everything but no one really notices. It's stable. Boring, maybe. But I like boring. I like quiet. And for most of my adult life, I've been just fine with that. My family, on the other hand, they don't really do quiet. My mom, Denise, is the type of person who likes to say she's old school. What that actually means is she likes to control everything and doesn't take well to being told no. Growing up, she ran the house with this weird mix of guilt and performance. If you didn't agree with her, you weren't just wrong, you were ungrateful, disrespectful, selfish. She's the kind of person who remembers every single favor she's ever done for you and brings them up like a receipt whenever it suits her. Then there's my younger sister, Fallon. She's 28, and let's just say, we've always been different. When we were kids, she was the one who needed more attention, more help, more space. That was fine. I didn't mind, really. I was more independent by nature. But as we got older, that dynamic never changed. Fallon always needed, and I always gave. Money for her first car? I helped. Place to crash after a breakup? My couch. Interview clothes? I paid. It wasn't that she asked rudely. Sometimes she didn't even ask. It was just sort of expected that I would be there, that I would help. And to be honest, for a long time, I didn't mind. She's my sister. Fallon's current boyfriend, Milo, has been around for about a year now. He's got this easy smile and this kind of vague, charming way of speaking that makes you feel like he's always selling something, even if he isn't. He gets along with everyone, which is impressive, considering how sharp-edged some of my family can be. My mom loves him, which, in hindsight, should have been a warning sign. Anyway, that's the cast. Now let's talk about the birthday. My birthday is in late March. I wasn't planning anything big. A couple of friends wanted to take me out for dinner, but I was honestly looking forward to a quiet weekend. Maybe get some takeout. Finally start the book that had been sitting on my shelf for 3 months, not have to think about work. Just a quiet day where I didn't have to solve anyone else's problems. But a week before my birthday, my mom called me. I was at work when she did, so I let it go to voicemail. The message was short, just Denise saying she wanted to do something special for my birthday and that I should call her back to talk details. I knew what that meant. She didn't want to ask if I had plans. She wanted to make the plans and tell me where to show up. Still, I called her back that evening. She sounded unusually upbeat. Told me she missed having the family together and thought it would be nice if we had a little dinner. Just the four of them, her, Fallon, Milo, and Aunt Celeste, my dad's sister, who's always been kind of a quiet presence in the background. She said it would be at my house since it was centrally located and made sense. I asked if she was sure everyone was okay with that. She laughed and said, "Of course. It's your birthday. We want to do it your way." That should have been the second red flag. Denise never wants to do things my way. Still, I agreed. It didn't seem worth pushing back over a small dinner. If they wanted to bring pizza and cake and call it a party, fine. It would save me the trouble of making plans. Besides, a part of me thought maybe, just maybe, things would feel normal for once. The day arrived. I spent most of the morning cleaning up the house, setting out a few folding chairs in case there weren't enough seats at the table, and making sure the guest bathroom had clean towels. Around 5 p.m., they all showed up, arms full of food and drinks, chatting like they hadn't seen each other in years, even though I knew Fallon had just been at my mom's house the night before. For the first hour, it was surprisingly pleasant. There was a pepperoni pizza that didn't survive 10 minutes, a veggie one no one touched but pretended to appreciate, and a homemade cake Fallon said she made but I strongly suspected was from the bakery near her apartment. We laughed a little, played a few rounds of this card game Fallon always pushes at gatherings, and everything felt familiar. Tense, sure, but familiar. Like the version of family we used to be when I was 10 and the world felt simpler. Then, sometime after we'd finished eating and just before I was about to start clearing plates, my mom stood up and clapped her hands. "All right," she said, grinning. "Time for the gift." I didn't expect anything, really. Maybe a book. Maybe something from one of those home goods stores that Fallon likes to wander through when she's bored. But then Fallon pulled out this large, carefully wrapped box from the corner of the room and set it in front of me with this big smile like she was holding the answer to all of life's questions. Milo pulled out his phone and started filming. And I should have known. I should have known right then. But I didn't. Not yet. And when I opened that box, that's when everything started to change. Right. So, I'm sitting at the table, cake half eaten, plates still stacked, and this box in front of me. It's wrapped with a lot more effort than anything Fallon has ever given me. The paper was thick, with little golden lines running through it, and the bow on top looked like it had been tied twice just to make sure it sat perfectly in the center. Fallon was standing behind my chair, hands clasped like she was waiting for applause. Milo was still holding his phone up, grinning. My mom had taken a seat across from me, watching with this strange mixture of pride and something else I couldn't name at the time. And Celeste wasn't smiling. She hadn't really spoken much all night, now that I thought about it. She was sipping from a glass and looking everywhere but directly at me. I started peeling the paper off, slowly. Something about the moment felt off. I don't know how to explain it except that everyone felt too still, like they were waiting for something. The box underneath was just a plain cardboard one, taped shut. I glanced up, trying to read their expressions, but Fallon just nodded enthusiastically. "Go ahead," she said. "You'll love it. It's really thoughtful." So I opened it. Inside was a blue plastic folder, the kind you might use in school to keep track of homework or loose papers. It looked worn, like it had been handled a lot. I lifted it out and opened it, half expecting to see something like printed family photos, or maybe some old drawings from childhood they dug up as a sentimental gesture. Instead, there was a stack of papers, typed, stapled, and organized like a report. I glanced at the top page. The title read something like Proposed Transition Plan and New Living Arrangement Agreement. I didn't understand. Not right away. I flipped to the next page. There were bullet points, dates, a numbered list. Then my eyes landed on a sentence in the middle of the third paragraph, effective April 30th, current occupant, Ronan, is expected to vacate the premises to allow for the establishment of shared family residency under the care and management of Denise and Fallon. I read it again, twice, and then I just stared. For a moment, I actually thought I'd misunderstood, that maybe it was a weird joke, a badly written skit for a family game night. Maybe Fallon was going through one of her creative writing phases again. But Milo was still filming, and Fallon was smiling. Denise spoke first. Her voice was light, like she was explaining a recipe. "I know it's a lot to take in," she said, "but we wanted to do this in person so you wouldn't feel blindsided later." I looked up at her slowly. What is this?" Fallon stepped forward and tapped a spot on the folder. "We've been thinking about this for a while," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "It just makes sense. Mom's rent went up, and my lease is ending. Your house has the space. You're always saying how quiet it is here. You don't even use the guest room." Denise added, "And you're hardly ever home during the day. You work so much. It's not like we'd be in your way." It was like listening to a group of people describe a house they found in a catalog and decided to move into, without realizing the house was mine. "This is my home," I said, finally. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry yet. Just confused. You're asking me to leave my own house? No, no, Fallon said quickly. Not asking. We're just suggesting a transition. You could stay with a friend for a while. Or maybe the guy you play chess with at work. I hadn't played chess with anyone since college. Denise reached across the table and rested her hand on the folder. It's not permanent, but we really do believe this would be good for everyone. And we already looked at a few rentals for you, just so the process wouldn't feel overwhelming. That's in the back. She was smiling, genuinely smiling. They had planned this. I looked over at Celeste. She hadn't moved. But when she noticed me staring, she looked away quickly. How long have you been planning this? I asked, not to anyone in particular. Fallon shrugged. A few months. We had to make sure the timeline worked. And I didn't want to interfere with your work deadlines, obviously. Obviously. I didn't say anything else. I didn't argue. I didn't flip the table or storm out. I just sat there, folders still open in my lap, listening to them talk about logistics like I wasn't in the room. Denise started listing the furniture they planned to move in. Her sewing machine, Fallon's bookshelves, Milo's gaming setup. They were laughing now. Fallon leaned into Milo and said something about how open concept houses made everything easier. That's when I smiled. Just a small one. Not sarcastic. Not angry. Just quiet. I closed the folder, stood up slowly, and said, "Thanks for the gift. I'm going to think about it." They didn't even hear me. Fallon was now describing how she wanted to repaint the hallway. She had picked a color. Sage green. I walked upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and sat down on the edge of the bed. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically. Not like a movie. Just quietly. I realized they weren't going to stop. Not until someone made them. And I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was suddenly very, very focused. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, is that their timing couldn't have been worse. Or maybe better, depending on how you look at it. Because Fallon was getting married in a few months. And I had just decided I'd be attending. And I wouldn't be bringing a gift. I was still sitting on the edge of my bed, holding that blue folder like it might snap in half if I gripped it too tightly. I wasn't hurt, not in the way I might have been years ago. And that surprised me. What I felt wasn't sadness or confusion. It was a quiet, steady click. Like a lock turning. They'd really done it. They'd handed me a plan to move me out of my own home on my birthday, no less, and dressed it up as a thoughtful gesture. And what was worse, they weren't even ashamed. They had celebrated it. Planned it down to the color of the hallway walls. Fallon had stood there, practically bouncing on her heels, talking about the natural light in my kitchen and how it would be perfect for her morning smoothies. Denise had been just as composed. Calm. Almost proud. Like this whole thing was a business deal she'd finally closed. I sat in that room for a long time, the muffled sound of their voices rising and falling downstairs. They weren't even talking about me anymore. Just chatting about what kind of runner rug would go well in the entryway. Eventually, I heard the front door open and close a few times. Laughter. Someone, probably Milo, whistling off-key. A car engine. Then another. And finally, silence. I waited until I was sure they were gone before I went back downstairs. The box was still on the table. The folder still inside. And next to it was a small card, the kind with foil letters that said, "Happy Birthday," on the front. I hadn't noticed it earlier. Inside was a message written in Fallon's neat, round handwriting. "We love you, and we know this is the right next step for all of us. Don't overthink it. Just trust us. Love, Fallon and Mom." I stared at the card for a long time. Then I set it aside, went to the kitchen, made myself tea, and sat at the table in complete silence. And that's when the idea began to form. Not all at once. Just the first thread. Fallon was getting married in 4 months. A garden wedding at this fancy little historic venue 2 towns over. I hadn't been involved in much of the planning, just got the save the date in a group chat and a vague mention of tux fittings sometime in May. But what I did know was that the wedding meant a lot to her. Fallon had always been someone who needed people to see her life as polished, perfect, slightly better than everyone else's. She treated milestones like performances. When she graduated college, she rented a white dress and made us pose for professional photos, caps included, even though the actual ceremony had been virtual and half the family didn't attend. When she started dating Milo, she made an Instagram post titled, "The Beginning of Forever," after one coffee date. So this wedding? This wasn't just a celebration for her. This was her moment, her spotlight. And that meant one thing: she couldn't afford for anything to go wrong. So I started taking notes. The next day, I made a private folder on my laptop. I titled it "Home Plans" in case anyone happened to see the tab open. Inside, I created subfolders. One was labeled Documents, where I scanned every single page of the transition plan they gave me. Another called Witness Statements, where I started jotting down memories and observations, everything I could remember from that night, and small things from before. Comments Fallon had made, texts I'd saved, even a voice memo Milo had once left me where he joked about finally getting a space with enough outlets for his stuff. Over the next few weeks, I kept quiet. I didn't bring up the folder. I didn't mention the house. When my mom called, I answered like nothing was wrong. When Fallon texted me a photo of a chandelier she wanted to hang in the living room, I just responded, "Looks nice." They thought I was adjusting. What I was actually doing was watching and gathering. Fallon's wedding planner, Ivy, was an old classmate of mine from high school. We hadn't spoken much in years, but we'd had the same math teacher and used to exchange homework answers over lunch. I messaged her on social media and said I was helping with the wedding. Could we catch up and go over some details? She was happy to meet up. We had coffee 2 days later. Ivy was chatty, friendly. She didn't seem to know anything about what had happened with the house. As far as she knew, everything was on schedule. Ceremony at 3 p.m., reception at 5, buffet dinner, dancing under the lights. She told me Fallon had been a bit intense about the seating chart, but otherwise, things were fine. I didn't push. I just asked small questions, listened, took mental notes. Fallon and Milo were paying for the wedding mostly through a combination of savings and help from my mom. The venue had strict rules about noise, and everything needed to be wrapped up by 10 p.m. sharp. Ivy also let it slip that they were planning a surprise slideshow for the guests, a sweet look back on Fallon and Milo's journey. My sister had asked everyone to submit photos or videos. That's when I knew exactly how this would go. The trap wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be messy. It would be clean, quiet, almost boring. The kind of revenge you can't point a finger at because, technically, no one did anything wrong. And the best part? They would never see it coming. Not until it was already unfolding in front of every guest they'd invited. Not until the spotlight turned and it wasn't on Fallon anymore. Over the next few months, I played the part they expected. The quiet older brother, the agreeable son, the mild-mannered host who didn't rock the boat. I nodded along when Fallon updated me about the moving schedule, smiled when Mom brought over curtain samples, and even helped Milo carry in a shelf he said they'd just store in the garage for now. They assumed I was folding, giving up. In truth, I was building the final piece of a quiet plan that had started the moment I read that birthday folder. Every evening after work, I logged into a separate account and worked on something I titled Final Cut, Fallon's Forever. I'd gotten the idea during coffee with Ivy, the wedding planner, when she mentioned the couple's surprise slideshow. Fallon wanted something nostalgic and romantic, she'd said. Pictures of the two of them from early dating days, proposal, some family stuff. She said you might send a few. I did, eventually. But I also asked Ivy if I could help edit the final slideshow video. Told her I had a decent setup, a little video editing experience, and that I thought it might ease Fallon's stress if someone close to the family handled it. Ivy had no problem with that. So I got to work. The first half of the video was just what they expected. Photos of Fallon and Milo grinning at picnics, hugging in matching flannel, Milo proposing at the lake. I even added soft music, fading transitions, and that golden tint every wedding slideshow seems to have. Then came the last part. The part no one but me had seen. It started subtly. A picture of my front porch captioned the future. Then a copy of a document, part of the transition plan, with Fallon's notes in the margins. One comment read, "Move my books here ASAP. Need to replace the ugly lamp." Then an audio clip. Fallon's voice, recorded the night of my birthday. "You could stay with a friend for a while. Or maybe the guy you play chess with at work." Followed by Milo's laughter. "We'll turn your office into a gaming room. It'll be sick." Then the final image, my birthday cake. Unlit. The caption, "Happy birthday, Ronan." The whole thing lasted maybe 20 seconds at the end. But it was enough. Enough to pull the curtain back. Now, I didn't want to humiliate Fallon or Milo or even my mom publicly. Not entirely. But I wanted people to see. I wanted them to notice, not just who they pretended to be, but who they actually were when no one was watching. When the day of the wedding arrived, I dressed sharp. Not flashy, just a clean navy suit, pressed shirt, and the watch my grandfather gave me when I graduated college. I arrived early, even before most of the catering crew, and offered to help with anything they needed. Ivy seemed relieved to have a pair of capable hands. I set up folding chairs, adjusted table linens, and even helped string some lights along the tent poles. As relatives began to arrive, I slipped easily into the role I'd played for years, the agreeable older brother, the polite son, the man in the background. I greeted my aunts with hugs, shook hands with cousins I barely knew, and nodded through half-hearted conversations about work, traffic, and how grown-up Fallon looked. Fallon didn't say much to me. When she did, it was clipped and professional, nothing like the syrupy voice she used for her guests. She was busy, posing for the photographer with Milo, rehearsing with the flower girl, checking every detail down to the exact shade of ribbon on the dessert table. She looked like she was staging a royal coronation, not a wedding. Milo mostly hovered behind her, smiling on cue, nodding along. He looked tired. The ceremony itself was lovely, I'll admit. Fallon walked down the aisle on our mother's arm, glowing in her lace-trimmed gown, her hair in waves I knew she'd had done that morning by a stylist from out of town. Milo looked misty-eyed the moment he saw her. He stumbled a little during his vows, which only made the guests coo louder. Everyone clapped as they kissed. Then came the reception. Tables under a large white tent. String lights. Soft music. People sipping punch and picking at tiny appetizers on skewers. I sat with a few cousins and old neighbors. Laughed politely. Ate slowly. Waited. After dinner, when the plates had been cleared and the cake was being wheeled into place, the lights dimmed. Ivy took the mic, beaming. "And now," she said, "a little walk down memory lane for our beautiful couple." Applause rose around the tent. The screen came to life. It began as expected. Childhood photos of Fallon with pigtails and scraped knees. Baby pictures of Milo with cake on his face. Then early dating photos, Fallon and Milo at the lake, bundled up at a fall festival, arms around each other in matching scarves. Everyone chuckled, clapped, sighed. The music swelled. Sentimental. Nostalgic. Then the tone shifted. The screen showed a wide shot of my front porch. The caption read, "The future." Laughter quieted slightly. Next came a copy of a document, projected just long enough to read the headline, "Transition Plan, Bedroom Reassignments." A few notes in the margins were clearly Fallon's handwriting. One read, "Move my books here ASAP. Replace that ugly lamp in the living room." Confused murmurs stirred across the tables. Then an audio clip began. Fallon's voice, "You could stay with a friend for a while. Or maybe the guy you play chess with at work." A brief pause. Then Milo's voice, "We'll turn your office into a gaming room. It'll be sick." The room fell silent. One more photo appeared. My birthday cake. Unlit. Still in its box. Captioned, "Happy birthday, Ronan." No music. Just silence. I was standing off to the side, near the speakers. I saw it all. I also saw the room. Fallon sat completely still, her hands clenched on the tablecloth. Milo's hand gripped his glass so hard I thought it might break. Denise, my mother, blinked slowly, like she wasn't sure what she had just seen. Or perhaps she was hoping she'd imagined it. It ended. The screen went dark. Fallon stood abruptly and leaned toward Ivy, whispering something sharp. Ivy, flustered, hurried over and fiddled with the projector, clicking through settings. Music began again, too loud and too cheerful. She tried to smooth over the awkwardness with a smile. But the damage was done. People noticed. That carefully polished image Fallon had spent years curating had cracked. And behind it wasn't something mysterious or misunderstood. It was entitlement, arrogance, self-interest. And that was enough. For that part. But I wasn't done. You see, while all of this had been playing out, the planning, the posing, the surprise move, I had been quietly handling something else. 2 months earlier, I contacted an attorney. Not to sue anyone, not to make threats. Just to get clear on what I already suspected. The house I was living in? It wasn't my parents'. It never had been. It had been left to me, solely and fully, by my grandfather. I was the legal owner. The deed said so. There was no co-signature, no shared claim. It was mine. I had the title updated, made it official. I waited, watched, listened. Then, the morning after the wedding, while the newlyweds were no doubt sleeping off their big night, I had the locks changed. And later that afternoon, I delivered 3 neatly printed envelopes. One to Fallon, one to Milo, one to Denise. Inside each, a copy of the deed, a list of belongings currently in the house that didn't belong to me, and a simple, polite statement. You have 30 days to remove your belongings. After that, they will be donated. Fallon was the first to respond. She sent a message saying she couldn't believe I'd do this right after her wedding, that I was being spiteful. I didn't respond. Denise called and left a voicemail. Her voice cracked as she said she was heartbroken and didn't know where this was coming from. I didn't return her call either. Milo never responded at all. He just showed up quietly the following week and packed a few boxes with the help of a friend. And they left. No dramatic confrontation. No lawyers. No shouting. Just silence. Fallon still tries to stir the pot sometimes. She posted something a few weeks later, one of those vague quotes about jealousy wearing a smile and how betrayal hurts more when it's family. I didn't comment. I didn't even open it fully. I still have the birthday folder. Not because I need it anymore, but because it reminds me how deeply someone will twist reality when they assume you'll always be the one to bend. It reminds me that keeping the peace isn't always peaceful. That sometimes, standing still means letting yourself be pushed over. I don't regret any of it. Now, I live in my home. Quietly. Freely. The rooms feel lighter. The silence doesn't ache.